Welcome to the Unshakable Man podcast and community. A community for men who want to practice tools and skills to get out of our heads and to go with patterns and to get into our bodies. I'm Chris Wilson. I'm joined today here with Londell Jackson and Mike Messersmith. Gentlemen, I'll give you an opportunity to say hello.
Hello. Welcome.
It's always that gap. It's good to be with you, gentlemen. Here, Londell and Mike and myself, we are stewards of the Unshakable Man Community. We are men who have volunteered our time to welcome new men into the Unshakable Man Community. If you're listening for your very first time, today is the third section of our 4-week fundamentals training. And today's theme is assertive vulnerability, using the space and going deep, or choosing to go deep. If you are in the community and you are practicing and you're in this third week, I'd just like to review what we've been through. We've been through the first section of welcoming you into the community and getting started. And then the power of presence and how to check in. We learned then going to our very first Unshakable Man group. Then we went to our second group and we learned about survival, shame, the man box, and belonging. And now today we are learning about assertive vulnerability, using the space and going deep. This is a journey. This is a somatic journey that you're moving through as you move through this fundamentals training. We are listening to these recordings. We're engaging with the Learning Center content, but then we're having a physical experience inside of a group. Early on, I talked about the view, the practice, and the result. And so what I want to point out is that you have actually been through something, right? You went to your very first group and we learned about the power of presence and how to check in, right? We learned that emotions are physical sensations happening in or on the body. We learned that we can only do this work in the present. Okay, we're always reinforcing the present. Okay, we're getting out of the story in our head and we're coming into the body. And we learned how to check in. And in that first group, it was just our first time being there. Okay, we're at choice. We're not every man that participates in these spaces. You are always at choice. But we were learning how to check in for our very first time, and then sharing just what in our life brought us here. And then we left that experience. Okay, we left the group. We went back into the flow of our default life. And we got to see how being a part of that experience shifted our relationship with the rest of our life, our experience of our life outside of the group, what I like to call our default life. And then if you've continued on in the fundamentals training, you listened to the next one about survival, shame, the man box, and belonging. Okay, and we learned how to construct or discover what our relationship is with this man box, this culture of manhood. And then we went to a group and we used that as a tool to find connection with the other men in the space, men who might look different than me, men who I might judge or perceive based on how they look or how they show up in the space to be different. And we used this one thing, this one cultural thing that we all exist within, to find a shared connection in our relationship with that box. Okay, by sharing what came up for us in a relationship with the man box. And again, as I share this, you're at choice. Okay, all you really have to do in these groups is show up. You don't actually have to do any of the things that we're saying to do here to participate in the group. You can actually just be there, and you will get something from it by simply witnessing and allowing yourself to be in the space. Okay. And so now we've reached, this is the turning point. This is the arc of this journey, this somatic journey that we're going on together. And when I say a somatic journey, I literally mean physically on or in our bodies, right? We're making a journey here together as human beings and men. And what's really special here, I think what I said before, Mike and Londell, was this is the first time you get to go through a group for your third time or something like that. But we'll often call it third time is the charm, okay? One of the reasons why I'm conjuring or bringing back in what we've been through is because a part of showing up in these spaces is simply becoming aware of the structure, so that the structure, each time you move through the structure, each time you do a check-in, your body gets better and better at allowing your protective parts to relax, and the structure becomes supportive so that you can open more and more, so you can participate in the space. Okay. And when it comes to this week's theme, assertive vulnerability, coming to a group for your third time, this is really the very first time that you actually get to show up in the space and you get to choose to be vulnerable, right? You get to come in here with a real intent, a purpose. You get to move through the flow of your week, and something might happen, and you're actually getting to say in your mind and I have a space for this. I can bring this to the group. All right. And now the group is starting to become more and more purposeful, more and more useful in your life. And you're learning how to witness the other men in the space, okay, which are part of the 3 roles we play in the group, which are guiding a man to go deeper, opening ourselves, learning to open and to give a voice to places inside that maybe haven't had one, and witnessing, actually being on or in your body and noticing, what am I feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? And what does that part need in the presence of another man? So I would love to bring Londell and Mike into the conversation here. And I would love to start off with just a question, gentlemen, about your own, and I'm surprising you guys with this one because I didn't want you to prep for this. And I just want to ask you guys about what it's like to your own perception of your own maturation in being in these groups. Like, how has but from your own perspective, what has it been like, if you just describe your own experience, not of being through just your first 3, because you've been in way more than 3 groups, but how have you seen yourself shift or change, and how you use the space, or what it's like to be in the space, if you can recall, from the beginning to now?
Certainly. So, Mike, you and I have to come up with some sort of order, or else
Yeah,
it's
really.
always going to be this long pause. But in the meantime, I'll speak right now. What comes up for me immediately is that while I agree that there is a somatic response, that your body is learning how to respond, and it's learning to communicate to your intellect, your mind. There's also a piece of our intellect that we learn to let go of to a certain degree, because I go into places with my shields held high. My wall is, 12 feet tall and, 5 feet thick, and I am ready to protect myself from anything and everything. And particularly when it's a room full of people I don't know, and particularly when it's a room full of white men that I don't know. And I say that particularly for a reason. And the more I went into community, the more I realized I did not need to have that wall. Now, my body, I could feel my body want to erect a wall, and intellectually, I'd have to say no. And I would have to feel my body relinquish that control or that desire to erect that wall, until it became the opposite reflex, where I would go into a group and my body would feel comfortable and safe about not erecting a wall. And now my mind goes into a space of, this is a safe space, or is this a safe space? So now I'm into a space where I assume the best instead of assuming the worst. And this is now taking me outside of our community, which I think is, for me, a better way to live my life. Living my life in a space of love, curiosity, and receptivity versus defense, anger, and vengefulness, even if I would even say that. And so for me, so that is what I've learned over time is I can go into a room and my body now is less tight, is less fearful, is more open, and my intellect is now scanning for, when do we need to begin to build a wall? When do we need to look for places to create safety instead of the opposite way?
That's powerful, Londell. Very powerful stuff. For me, I remember going to my first few groups and being somewhat terrified, to be in a group of men that I don't know how they're going to react, don't know how I'm going to react. Remember thinking about this somatic practice and feeling and like, what the hell is this? And this is bullshit. And, I know what feelings are and all these other things. And I remember going through the check-in and the first couple of times not being, not really being able to feel anything. Mm-hmm. And so literally just trying to come up with things to say.
Not being able to feel something. Can you say more about
correct.
that?
Yeah. I had I couldn't identify any feelings in my body. None. I was so shut down. I was so emotionally closed off to what a feeling was, because all of my feelings came from here. They, even though they were coming from my body, yeah. I had no way to realize that. I had no words for it. I had no feelings for the feelings.
Yeah.
And that sounds, just saying that sounds insane today.
Yeah.
But that really was how I felt going into the first few groups. And now it's, Chris, you talked a little bit about, the, what is it? You always have, you're always at choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in a group last night, and Chris talked about, the three things, witness being one of those things. And last night, I was the witness last night. Because I wasn't feeling drawn to share,
Mm-hmm.
but I felt very drawn to, the things that the men were feeling in the group and being with those things.
Was your experience of witnessing passive, or were you active on and in your body while witnessing?
No, I was active while witnessing, active in my body.
Yeah. Can you share what that is for you, or what your relationship, like, what is that inner experience like?
Yeah. Well, so when a man shares, you actually, as you drop in, slow down and drop in to the container, to the space. For me, it's an opening.
Mm.
So when I drop in, I open myself to the energy that's going on in that space. And so when a man shares, you feel, I feel that share. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when Londell talked about the wall, and when Londell talked about, dropping that wall and going in with an entirely different attitude, I felt that, and I felt a warm sensation in my chest, and I felt happy. I felt holding of Londell, in that. So, so it's an absolutely incredible experience to go from that closed off person to, to that open, feeling person.
Mm-hmm. So we can talk about give more to this in terms of the 9 components of emotional awareness inside in another session, but that to just use what we'll talk about in the future in Thursday sessions, that emotional granularity and that emotional attunement to your body, right? Connecting the head to the body. What I want to just point out from both you and Londell is how when we say using the space, right? When we say, like, the first 2 times we're coming into the space, and this could go on for more, right? Like, this is we've designed this with some structure, but every man has his own experience. Once you start coming in and there's a structure that your body and your mind, your nervous system can start to trust, right? These protective parts, which are adaptive and are there for a reason, right? They can start to trust the environment. What I notice, Mike, is that when you're witnessing in the space, you're still, even though you might be on mute, or you might be sitting back in your chair, or you might be holding your posture, you're noticing when you just share what your inner experience is in your own words. What I'm connecting to is that you're actually noticing the sensations on and in your body in relationship to what a man brings into the space. And in my relationship with my partner, or with my little brother, the important people in my life, my dad, my mother, coworkers, even you guys as friends, right? As fellow creators in this, when I'm moving quickly outside of the space, I don't have this in my life, right? Like with my partner, when she shares or says something, there's an emotional contagion there. There's an enmeshment of I care so much about this relationship, right? That it's very challenging to practice these skills on my own, like in the flow of the whirlwind of my life. But as I hear what you share, Mike and Londell, yours, I felt like you were going in and out of your experience of the group and then talking about your experience in other containers and relating how am I right? Was I following you there of how, okay. And so that's the connection when I want to make for men who are in their third stage, right? You're coming into your third group, is that when we say using the space, we are going through this process. They're making this somatic journey in wisdom practice. This is literally awakening, right? We're getting out of our head and the movie of our life and our thoughts and moods, judgments, stories, belief systems. And we're actually opening to experience more. We're feeling more on and in our body. And this is practice. This is training, right? Like we're showing up. And to answer my own question, like how have I noticed myself in this space? I took some notes while you guys were sharing, just where things you inspired in me. One was ruptures. Another was literally being able to seek sensation, realizing that sensations happening on and in my body outside of the space are now, they're not always something to stamp down. It's actually like, wait, what am I feeling? I'm feeling something. Something's happening here. And it's actually allowing that to come up and out. And just while I'm driving in my car, right? Like when I'm, and then I wrote sadness, exclamation point. And this is something that is very, this is very close to me and also important for me to share from a community perspective, is that my ability to be sad, that my relationship with sadness is special. It's now to a point where when I'm sad at witnessing, I just talked about this today in another interview, and I was walking down the street this afternoon and I watched this mother with a small baby trying to struggle to get the baby into a car seat. And there was a little boy that was still pick upable, like under her waist height. And he was going nuts. He was like, he was absolute throwing a fit on the side of the road. And I'm like moving quickly to my car to get to across town. I don't travel very much anymore, so it was jarring to need to do this and across town. And I see her, and she picked up her son in the most soft way and said something like baby, and just was and he just immediately stopped. And I just noticed I cried. Like I just felt it was so awesome. And to me, that is a sign of being open, right? Like I notice when that's not happening anymore, right? Like I notice on a Tuesday in the rush of my life that like, oh, I can't feel that sadness. I can't feel this quality, and it's a sign that I'm not open. I'm actually like some protective part is there. And that used to be my life, right? That used to be the experience of my life as it was. I didn't think I was closed. It was just, right? And so, and this is over 7 years, right? Like we've been doing this work, right? But it's not about the amount of time to me. It's just, and then why am I doing this? I wrote that down. I used to come into these groups at times and be like, why am I doing this? I don't have a reason to be here right now. Right. Like for me, this wasn't about addiction. This wasn't like at a certain point it became, I don't feel like anything is going wrong right now in my life, because initially coming into these groups, it was characterized by having to have something be wrong. And that was a shift for me when I realized I actually come into these groups and I realize how I feel. Like being in relationship and being surprised by the presence of Londell or the presence of Mike, even here in this, as we entered this space, I see how I am through you, right? And really it's hard to compare about how advanced my meditation practice has to get, how intact, right? Like my own seated practice for me to have that sense alone in my bedroom or on my meditation pillow. Whereas when we're in this group once or twice a week, I always leave energized. Right.
Yeah.
And that to me is this sign that I'm actually being just in relationship and moving through the 7 stages of a group, which we'll talk about outside of the fundamentals training. You guys being in your presence, just witnessing you, helps me let go of whatever emotional residue I'm carrying.
Chris, if I may.
Yeah.
Something you said there really, really resonated with me, because I remember coming, to my first groups, and yeah, it was always about something being wrong or something being missing. And then all of a sudden there was like this epiphanous moment when I came to a group and I didn't have anything. And I just was in the group. And it was amazing how much I took away from that group. And to this day, I still remember that group, because it was such a, aha moment. And I was like, oh my God, I'm getting more from these guys than anywhere else in my life. And I was just like, I just felt so blessed at that moment. So, sometimes I come to group and it's just a celebration. And, I just want to share.
Hold on, Mike. We don't want to do into week 4.
Sorry.
Just kidding.
Yeah, sorry.
Just kidding.
But yeah, sometimes you come to group and it's just it's just you feel so good about something that you want to share it. And sometimes you feel like shit and you want to share that. So it's I don't know. It's a beautiful thing. It absolutely is.
So, assertive vulnerability. We're talking about like using the space, and there's a challenge here that I want to bring in. Our saboteur story in the head of men who are getting into this work of, well, how is this not whining, right? How is this not simply complaining about stuff that's happening in my life? How is this not just a bunch of, to be honest, there's something that was recently sent to me by 3 different men in our community of the crying CEO, right? Putting out a message on Instagram with myself crying, and then people are reacting to this and as like a narcissistic call for attention. So I think it's very important in our 3rd week for us to talk about this, right? What do you guys want to bring in? How is it different?
I've been thinking about this.
You guys are going out of order.
Yeah. We're going to switch off each time. I've been thinking about this ever since, the beginning when we were talking about, talking about that. And I haven't experienced that in the container. And I don't know, it's interesting to me. I mean, I've been trying to think of, Yeah, but I have not. I have not, and maybe it's just because, the facilitators that I've been with have just been really good at identifying that and
That's
saying, saying, hey, let's slow down for a minute. Let's take a breath into that. So I think maybe that's some of it is I haven't really noticed it just because, I've been in groups where, where it's just been quickly identified and I don't want to say dealt with because that's not the right word, but showing the practices so that we get to the root of what's going on.
Yeah. It's good that we were talking about this today after having spoken or discussed the man box, because I think a lot of this comes from the idea of men being vulnerable about situations in their life and expressing feelings about situations in their life, and then being told that they're whining or they're being narcissistic or they're attention seeking.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, this couldn't be a more perfect example of putting someone in or an ideal that is within the man box as defined by United States standards.
Great reference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for me, whining is bitching about something just because you want to bitch about it, and then not coming up with any sort of constructive way to deal with the issue, or blaming someone, being down on yourself about something, again, and just complaining to complain, quite honestly. I know I've done that a lot of my life, and it's just like, oh, woe is me. And yes, we all have that ability, and we have the permission to go into that space. So I'm not going to go and say that we can never have that. But the piece is that when we want to stay there and when we're not open to understanding, well, where is this coming from? And how can I move past this? How can I move through this? How can I move around this?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the difference.
Or even in the moment, bringing him to be with it and allowing it to pass, right? Like in the container.
Yeah. And so, and whining, I'm pretty certain that we typically, well, I guess there's been times when I've labeled my actions as whining, because I'm again reflecting and labeling myself from the American man box standards. But more often than not, this is an extrinsic labeling and an extrinsic process that someone else is trying to put onto someone else. And we can either choose to own that or not. And so now we're dealing with two issues. One, am I going to own this title of being whining and narcissistic? I mean, being a narcissist is actual psychological disorder. And so I'm not going to argue with licensed practicing psychiatrists, psychologists, and other mental health practitioners.
Right.
Yet,
which we are not.
If we are not, no.
Yep.
And and to have a situation and someone from the outside labeling me as a narcissist because I go onto my social platforms and express my emotion and what have you, and then someone else labels me as a narcissist, that is not my issue. That's someone else's issue about how they view my actions, my outward expressing of my vulnerability. And so now they have to deal with, so we were saying this earlier, they're vomiting all of their shit all over me and trying to make me own it. And I can choose to not own it. And then, or I can choose to own it.
What I think you're making a case for, and is what happens outside of a place with a container, right?
Mm-hmm.
That this is what can happen, right? In the blogosphere, the Instagram, in your kitchen with your partner, in a group of friends, while at the DMV, right? Like waiting in line for something. But what is key for me, what I hear in here, is that in this space, when we say, my name is, I am Chris, and I am checking in, the somatic and psychosomatic frame that is created, right? Like, I am Chris and I am checking in. And then I pause and I go into my perceptual database and I choose to start to express or say something. And the men in the space are holding that space. And then I have some experience, right? Something is happening, right? And what we're painting a picture of is that is a thing, right? Like the you guys,
Judgment.
well, I may have a sensation in my body and then it triggers a judgment, but I'm able to recognize, or at least the container,
Yes.
the key is we're able to recognize our judgments, right? And maybe, just maybe, Londell, and this is what I think I want to point out from Mike too, is like, he's like, oh, I haven't experienced this because guys, stop it. Is that when we're in the space, if I'm spinning out in my life, and this has happened, I have had this happen. I have had groups where I personally have shown up and been moving through something multiple times over a week period or 2 week periods. And the men in the space say to me, hey, when you said that, Chris, I feel tight. I feel gross. Like, this doesn't feel right. Like right. And then maybe something like the story in my head is that this just doesn't feel like right. And their bodies are sending them a message that maybe, right. And I think the key here is that distance, right? That boundary that allows men to use the space. And for you, maybe, Londell, to express and share the story or the judgment that you're having, and for me to remain open enough to receive it, right? And to actually right myself, right? To actually own that, hey, I'm really caught in something over here. And I think we can get into this again in later talks on our Thursday stuff, or we can bring in other people to talk about this. Like Dr. Chris Spromberg has talked about this quite a bit, where this is what we don't have in our life, right? As human beings, like we're all super connected and not connected at all, right? Like the tribe held us together, and that it's not there. It helped us really find out from spinning out. And I will say there's one really cool show you can watch, Alone, on the History Channel. Have you guys seen Alone yet? Okay. Case in point, we'll put this in and Digging Deeper resources in the Learning Center, but Alone, season 1, season 2, I think there's like 10 seasons. A few men in our community have mentioned it to me, and I went and started watching it. You're alone in the woods for a period of time, dropped off with 10 items, all alone with a video camera. And you can see what happens, how we are not meant to be alone, right? Like as human beings, we like being out in the wilderness without needing to survive to get rescued is very different than being truly alone and staying there, right? And we are all deeply alone in our experience. And what's happening in these groups, when we check in and we learn to use the space, is I get to read, how is what I'm bringing into the space, how is it coming off? How is Mike receiving it? How is Londell receiving it? How are 8 other men receiving it? And so And the final thing I want to share in this is that because as our community grows, this has come up from a bunch of different men have said this in different ways. Well, the group is getting bigger. If I don't share, right? If I'm not sharing, how am I getting anything from this, right? And at least in the community groups, right? Because we can have individual private groups where it's just 5 or 10 men moving through a process or showing up the same time every week with each other. But in our community groups, I think one of the biggest values we get out of being in this program is getting to see if there's 10 or 20 men in a group for an hour and 2 men go really deep, getting to witness that and getting to witness another man guide that man deeper is a benefit to me in my experience, right? From witness.
And I think the piece about creating a brave space versus a safe space is essential to this whole process, because in the brave space we're able to challenge each other in a respectful, loving, and caring way, versus a safe space where I don't believe that could happen.
The other note I took was ruptures. That's the other area that I think to this theme of using the space, ruptures have been a huge learning experience, because when there's a rupture in the group, maybe, which can happen, right? Like a man can bring something into the space. And especially, I think this is one of the number one things that I am, is currently an edge for me in the stewardship of this community, is as new men come into the space, disruptive behavior, right? We have agreements in order to be able to do this work. And when there's a rupture, we've been through this over the past 2 years as a community, that it's very important to come back to this core intention that we are all here to practice tools and skills to get out of our head and into our body. It's not necessarily to be friends, right? It's not necessarily to feel a sense of brotherhood, right? It's not necessarily to, right? And when that is challenged, I think that's when we have the most beautiful learning experiences of being able to be in a difficult, hold that container in a fierce, open-hearted way, and actually stand that line, right? Of, this is what I'm feeling in my body. This is what it needs. And then learning to give it for myself, and maybe having the support of other men in the space to assist, right? But thankfully, we have not had any violent or attacks on men in the space where energy and awareness was being directed at another man. But I do want to say, while we're here, that would be against our guidelines, and that would mean that you are not taking responsibility for what is happening in your experience. You're putting it onto or directing it to another man, which would mean that we can't do this work. The group would, that is another very different thing than using the space.
Certainly.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, third week, assertive vulnerability, using the space and going deep. So the stretch for men this week coming into the space is to use the space. And to learn how to do that, we've picked our top 3 prompts. You do not have to use a prompt. In fact, I would prefer you don't. I would prefer you just come in and learn to work with whatever is present for you. And so there's 2 topics here that we'll reference, and we'll talk about these over and over again. One is scanning your perceptual database. I say it over and over again. When you come into the space and you have an opportunity to open, and you choose to use it, which is one of the roles. It's in the second round check-in. So the floor is open, and we will at a facilitator or men in the space will say, okay, who would like to go? When you say, I would like to go, and my name is Chris and I'm checking in, or my name is blank and I'm checking in, the next thing you do is you have this opportunity to scan and to choose something from the whirlwind of your life. How deep, how far do you want to go? Is it something that's stuck in a recent past, something that happened in your life, something that's deeply rooted, right? And that is a skill, to be able to scan and to just pick that thing. And then when you pick it, there's something that happens. And we'll talk about this again also in the future, which is there's a context. And then attached to that context, there's a narrative. And then that context and that narrative create a story. So there's like this thought object, there's some relationship to that, there's a context, and then there's this narrative. And you'll start wanting to learn, you're going to come in and you're going to need to learn how to tell it, how to bring men into that space. And this is where I always like to say that we're not really having conversations, right? Like Londell and I might talk after a group and have a beautiful conversation about something that came up from that group. But when you're sharing, what we're actually doing is conjuring. We're bringing something out of our experience. We're scanning our perceptual database. And I'm hoping this isn't too advanced. I hope this comes across. Londell and Mike, tell me if this is not going to translate in a class like this. You're grabbing something, and then you start to talk about it. You start to stare it. And if you start to go off into a story, the men in the space may adjust you and say, hey, what's the context? What's important here? What feels resonant, right? So you can get to it. And then we help you come into the experience by asking you 3 of our most important questions. What are you feeling? Where do you feel it in your body? And that's where we'll save that for other sessions, okay? Where we're getting out of the story in our head and we're getting into our body, okay? And that's where we get into dropping out of story. So one of the easiest ways or the most resonant ways to notice this is, I think we say it a lot here over the past 3 sessions, where when Mike or when Londell, when you guys have said something and I share to you, when you said that, I felt something. And then there is a relationship with that. We'll use the sentence completion, and the story in my head about that is blah, 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 blah. What this does is this allows me to take responsibility for what is my story in my head. And I'm practicing the skill of taking responsibility for that while sharing it with another man. And this gives that man who hears it, it allows his protective parts to stay relaxed, because I'm not saying, hey, when you did that, you're doing this, right? And maybe that will help him to see himself through your story, or maybe your story is just about your experience, right? And this is what develops relational intimacy. This is a very it's simple yet profound way to start to develop a sense of relational intimacy, because the men in the space don't know. I don't know what stories are in Londell's head. So for Londell, for you to pause and to tell me what's happening on and in your body, and then to share the story in your head about it, is a gift. It's a huge gift, right? And your voice and your tone and your whole experience, the human voice conveys so much more than, it's everything, right? Did you guys, want to jump in there on anything? I know that we went off. We don't have to, but if there's anything that you feel inspired to share. Okay, cool. So we can end here tonight on the juicy part, the juicy part. And so there's 3 prompts, and we can each pick one. Again, you gentlemen are at choice. We don't have to do this because this is a recording. But the 3 prompts that we can, if you're listening to this and it's your 3rd group, and you really you feel. You don't have to make up your mind, and please don't practice. Please do not practice before coming to a group. Just show up. Okay. But there's 3 prompts you can use if you're looking for some creative tools to help you. Okay. These 3 prompts, one of them is a deep reveal. The other is an if you really knew me flow. And then the 3rd one is something that's holding me back. Okay. So I'm just going to explain briefly each one. And then Londell, Mike, myself will pick straws or something. And so this is fun. Never got to do this before. So on a recording. So a deep reveal. So what a deep reveal is its power is held in your choice, your choice to pick something, one thing, and to presence it, to bring it out from a place inside and to bring it into the space. And something that is, I think, important about a deep reveal is that it is just one thing. And that when you check in and you say, my name is blank and I'm checking in, you pause and you come into your experience, come into your body. And when you share your deep reveal, you allow yourself to come back into your experience and to allow silence to come back into the space. And we'll often invite a soup breath, which is a breath where you inhale in your nose like you're smelling, you just walked in the house and you noticed some beautiful smell, right? We all know how we automatically do it. We just, and what's important about a soup breath is that softness allows us to feel more. Whereas a deep breath, like, actually has an intensity that can cut off sensation on and in the body. Okay. And so the deep reveal, when it's put into the space, there's what's happening on and in your body, but there's also the sensations that are happening on and in the body of the men who receive it. And so we invite them, the men in the space, to inhale and exhale to be with what is happening on and in their body. And then after about 10 to 20 seconds, there'll be something to relate to. Okay. And we're not going to get into any process here or go deeper into it. And I do just want to set the container. We talked about this before, that we're going to do these as an example, but this is an example. We're not actually in a group, and we're doing our best to not act, to create some structure here, to give you guys some insight. But I want to just notice that we might cut at the end and just shake it off just to create some space. And then we can talk about what it was like. The second one is if you really knew me. Something that's really powerful about if you really knew me is when you say your name, you're checking in. If you really knew me, you do 5 or 10 if you really knew me's. And there's this ladder approach to an if you really knew me and some free association. And so what happens is if it can be, we often can get up in our head about how to say things correctly. And so the rhythm of if you really knew me, you would know blank. If you really knew me, you would know blank. If you really knew me, you would know blank. That's fast, actually, for me. And as I reenact it here, it actually, for me, is usually something more like, if you really knew me, you would know. If you really knew me, you would know if you really knew me, you would know and notice how whatever comes out, that there's this soft inhale in the nose and then an exhale through the mouth, and to be with the sensation on in the body after what is shared. Okay? Because what we're doing here is we're literally learning to be with a man in his experience without needing to fix or to change. And the gift of receiving a man's share is, I don't know what you're going to share or say. So when it goes out into the ether, you're helping me find, like, wow, like something will come up on and in my body. And so it's very important to do that soup breath. It's just the softest, like, okay. And then the third one, which is probably like the most utilitarian. I like this one. I really enjoy this one in groups. It's really neat to see how this one helps with the masculine, bringing the masculine into the penetrative masculine desire or need to penetrate into our life, to have direction, right? To have to make a choice, to move towards something, right? The call to adventure. And this one is something that's holding me back is, okay? Because a big part of this work is actually bringing this work out into our life, all right? And we haven't talked about our inspired integrations yet, but we're going to do that next week. That we're not just keeping what's in the space in the space. We actually take this work, what happens in here, and then we do things outside the space that are related to being in here. And so that this one is more direct. Something that's holding me back in my life is, there you go. Okay. All right, gentlemen. We're feeling are we feeling energized and connected enough to take a safe risk of vulnerability on a recording?
Definitely.
Why not?
All right. Should we rock, paper, scissors for who gets first pick?
I think it's Londell's turn.
All right. It's Londell's turn. Yeah, go for it. Go for it, Londell. Take the first pick. A deep reveal, and if you really knew me, or something that's holding me back.
We'll go with a deep reveal.
Okay. So to just create our container, just like we're in a group, my name is blank. I'm checking in. Deep breath. Mike, just to prepare us, let's just take a few deep breaths in our nose. And I do just want to set the container. We're not going to bring you through any process or anything like that. I'll give you the opportunity to close out your share. Okay?
And what's the prompt again?
After you check in, my deep reveal is...
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And don't forget to say I'm Londell and I'm checking in.
I'm Londell and I'm checking in. My deep reveal is I oftentimes feel as if I am an imposter. This is Londell and I'm checking in.
Thank you, Londell. Mike, what did you notice? I'm happy to go.
I noticed a total connection with that.
Londell, I noticed an insecurity. I noticed a tension on and in the front of my body, right as you're getting started, when you paused, and I took a inhale in my nose and softened, and there was like a depth for me of waiting to hear what you would bring into the space. And then when you shared what you shared, I noticed like a judgment of and like a relief of like, ooh, was he going to share something that, right? And then I felt bad about that.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Yeah. All right. Shall I go or shall you go? Mike, you go. You pick. You pick. Leave me last. Leave me last. I made this up. So.
All right. I think I'll go with what's holding me back.
Okay.
Mike, I'm checking in. What's holding me back in my life is a need to always be right. And Mike, and I'm checking in.
Thank you, Mike. What did you guys notice? Anything? Trying to just stay in my tender space. This is really cool.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
It's really doing this in this form is very powerful.
Yeah.
It is. It's just I don't know, maybe because it's recorded, maybe because you know that other people are going to are going to experience it, are going to be with this. It's just really a cool feeling.
Yeah. While we wait for Londell, something I keep noticing as we move through the process of creating these is this, like, outside of this space, there's a, when you said like needing to do it right or needing to be right, for me, it's like, there's like a quality, like a tension, right? An insecurity, to the imposter, right? How do I what's this going to be like, right? And it's all these questions are up in the head. And then there's like this dropping in to, okay, we're going to do this. We're just going to see what comes out of it. And then being in here with you, gentlemen, over the experience of this, I feel how this is this is love. Like, this is creative. This is how we are taking our experience and doing in the only way we know how, just interacting with one another. It's just beautiful, man. It's just really beautiful.
Well, that's, it's something else that, you mentioned the love, and it's so compelling how you do feel that love, and you feel love for, I mean, you and I have never met in person. I've never met Londell in person, but I've only met one person in any of the groups that I've been in. Once I've met one person, but there is a level of, there's that level of love that transpires. And, a lot of, for me, my experience has been, because of the man box, right? That love is, something that's only shared with, those that you're really close with. And in this container, there is that level of closeness, and it's amazing how rapidly it happens.
Yeah. It's well, Londell got kicked off. He's on his way back. But it's neat to be able to be here. It's not just neat. It's just to an expression, right, of what we are doing in group. It's really, it's just, it's like nonverbal. It's just very hard to verbalize what I feel and see when it's like we have this experience as a group of human beings, as a group of men. We're learning to structure the group. And now it's like, okay, we've been doing that for 2 years together. And now it's like, how do we structure it outside to bring it into our life? Hey, Londell,
Yeah.
welcome back, man.
Thanks.
So sorry we lost you.
I didn't know I was gone until I heard you say that you were waiting for me.
Oh no. Well, while we were waiting, we had we got on a beautiful tangent of just appreciating what it feels like to be in this space, creating this. And I'm happy that we get to record this for the men who are going to engage in this, because I think it expresses. It's hard for me to give words to what it feels like to create this, but to be in this space with you gentlemen who we've been practicing together for the past 2 years, it's really neat to feel the quality outside of this of how I can get into my head, or I can have fear or insecurity. And Londell, to what you shared, I actually realized imposter syndrome, like a feeling of being an imposter for me outside. But then when I come into this space with you, it's like we have the skills to be with each other, and that fades. And then this experience is like love. It's creativity. It's just this expression and this back and forth. And then to layer on top of that we're doing this to literally share this with other men, with other human beings, to welcome them through this journey. It's like, it's just awesome. Right? Right. Agreed. As usual, one powerful word from Londell. It's all we need. All right. I'm Chris, and I'm checking in. If you really knew me, you would know that I grew up in a bed and breakfast on Cape Cod and got to watch my dad. I got to be in his space and watch him work. And that's really affected me more and more. Feeling very thankful for that. If you really knew me, you would know that when I was in high school, I wanted to try to make the U.S. national team in cycling. And really what I was doing is I felt like afraid to sit still. There was like a fear of being still. Like if I was still and I was just being, I'd be worthless. If you really knew me, you would know that after the year after my anxiety attack, when I was 28, I noticed my throat getting tight. I sat on the beach and looked out at the ocean and had this incredible fear of, I could see the Golden Gate Bridge, and I see it now, of like I could feel what it felt like to not want to live, and to feel so deeply alone. And at that moment, I also felt more alive and more connected to anything I've ever felt my whole life. I'm Chris, and I'm checking in.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
So,
I'll be honest, I feel that was a lot for me right now, to be in here, to go from where we just were to what I'm feeling. I'm feeling tension in my body and the need to like just take some space for myself.
I'm feeling deep connection. And when you shared about your father, I just felt a warm sensation, throughout my body. I just felt love. And when you shared about the feeling of being still and that being a feeling of worthlessness, I resonate with that to this day. And I don't know, just you talking, it's like we talked about earlier in this episode. I just, the feelings that I had based on your share were extremely impactful.
Thanks, Mike. And I do want to just check in with you guys and let you know that, like, I noticed as I did that, there was like I felt locked up after, and there was like a thing of like doing this on a recording for me, and I felt like a frozen after, which I judged and didn't like. But then I noticed, Mike, as I was able to check out and get out of my head and get down into my body, like you're even mentioning my dad, is able to feel softer, and like tears come up, and this is a I don't know. I really just feel the need to like speak to whoever might listen to this, that this is not a, that this is like very important to me, and also not like this is our group right now to me, and important felt tight. It's I care about this, what happens in this space right now. And I hope we close it out with the way that we would close out a group. And it feels very special to share this on a recording.
Yeah. I wanted to quickly say that I really felt a profound connection when you, Chris, mentioned about sitting and seeing the Golden Gate Bridge and feeling, and I'm not going to say your words because I can't remember them verbatim now, about not wanting to be here. That is a feeling that I would never wish on anyone. And I know, but I'm sorry that that's something that we have in common. And I thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. That is a space. It's a dark space. It's a learning space. It can be a learning space, I should say. But it's a painful place. So I thank you for taking us there.
Yeah. I'm feeling bashful and also I'm here. This is what we're doing, and that's what. Yeah. Thank you so much, Londell. I feel a desire to close this out and to bring back the men into the space who are listening, and to thank Mike and to thank Londell for showing up, and to the men who are moving through this program, to honor you for getting this far. And I'd like to just bring in and to bring us back to the stretch for this week. After you listen to this episode, your stretch is to simply attend your third group, and to bring us back to assertive vulnerability, using the space and going deep. And I just want to end on one final reminder that you are at choice. What we shared in the space here tonight is just an example that we use here from a place of creativity, and for me, speaking for myself, from my heart, from a desire to simply share this work with more men. And my hope is that, not hope, this is our way. This is what we're doing, sharing this with more men. Thank you so much for being here. We will see you in group. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Right.